So, how does a rabbi's son who doesn't know much about secular studies, didn't know what a major was in college, do 3 degrees, study for the bar exam, pass the bar exam, and then not practice law and start his own investment advisory firm? So, today I want to go through that journey. But before I go through that, I want to preface with all this talk. I want to enable people as far as finding what's congruent with them, because I think one of the most important things, there's a lot of noise nowadays with the internet, technology. You're constantly bombarded with information, whether that's YouTube, Instagram, TV, constantly telling you what to do. And I think as a result of that, you lose your inner voice as far as what really talks to you. Because if I took an artist and I made them an accountant, and I took an accountant and made them a dancer, those people will not be happy. They could objectively be interesting careers, but it's not congruent with them. And every single person has a unique talent, unique life journey, unique characteristics. And I think to maximize yourself and maximize your potential, it requires introspection. It requires you to dig deep and see, what is my unique journey? What am I uniquely talented? What talks to me? What light do I need to bring to the world? And I see many people, and it's easy to fall prey because you're constantly bombarded with information. Follow these 3 steps. You need to do this career. At this age, if you don't do this, you're in trouble, or whatever it is. And that's all imitation. And so you're never going to be your highest self. The highest self is when you're fully connected with yourself. The person that you're constantly in a relationship with 100% of the time. There's no one that even comes close to that. So all this is take with a grain of salt. Obviously, you can learn from some of the things I did, some of my mistakes. But I think at the end of the day, it's about introspection and seeing, what am I uniquely crafted to do? And then everything else, you'll be a lot happier. You won't be constantly comparing yourself to other people, which is the thief of joy. At this age, I'm not here. At this age, I'm not married. At this age, I don't have this career. At this age, I'm married. At this age, I'm divorced. At this age, I have kids. Whatever it is, you could constantly do that and constantly be in that game. And people are sucked into it. So if there's one thing you could take away, it would be that, is how do I get connected to my innermost self? How do I tap into my unique talents? How do I tap into my creativity and create? Because that, I think, would be your highest vibration. So I grew up in Kendall. My dad was a rabbi, and I, didn't have that much secular studies. Was very focused on Judaic studies, which was great foundation as far as values, principles, met many people in the community. But I always knew that I wanted a different path. I was connected to religion, but not to the same extent as my parents were. And so I did want to go to college. So I attended college, and the first day I go in there, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know what a major is. And ironically, the major that I wanted, I didn't even know what economics was, which was I ended up majoring in. But when I came there, that's when I really came to love economics, love the academic pursuit. And so while I was there, I realized, okay, maybe I want to pursue a law degree, because everything is super regulated, and I felt like I kind of had a connection to it. I like Talmud, which has connectivity to law as far as the approach, the framework. And then I liked philosophy, and people said I would be good at law. So I worked on pursuing my law degree as far as applying to colleges. And my thought was, okay, I will go to the best law school in Florida, which at the time was University of Florida. And I will practice law in Miami, which is what I wanted to do. So I start my first year in law school. And then after my first year, it kind of hit me that I don't think the legal practice is for me. Now, I want to preface this. There's people that love it and 100% do it. If you feel connected to it, if you feel you're making a difference, then do it. And there are people that do great work in it. But for me, and people ask me, so I'm going to go through a few of the reasons why I decided not to pursue it. But a couple of the things were, after my first year, I decided to network with all of them successful attorneys. And when I looked inside as far as connecting from a human being, I realized that they weren't happy from an energetic standpoint. And I asked them because I'm like, okay, let's get to the crux of the issue, right? Like we're all doing stuff, but there's something deeper always going on, right? Like, are you connected to what you're doing? Are you all these things are a lot of times like titles and all that stuff. A lot of times it's an allusion to something bigger. So none of them could say if they had to do it over, they would become a lawyer again. And then I remember even before law school, people said, like, don't go to law, don't do it. And they all looked unhappy, except for a couple of people, to be fair. But for myself, I didn't really enjoy the pursuit. Like the legal work, I much more enjoyed my undergrad work as far as economics, philosophy, and stuff like that. The legal work, like looking through a contract and drafting a contract and things like that, it didn't interest me as much. And then the classes itself as well weren't as interesting to me. It seemed as if it didn't have the scientific rigor that I would like. It seemed as if, okay, legislators made a law and they could constantly change it. There wasn't necessarily a consistency. Obviously, there is some sort of art to it. There is some sort of principles, but it didn't really entice me. And then also in the legal world itself, there's something called stare decisis, which basically means that the way the judge ruled previously will be how the judge rules in the future. And you want to always analogize your case to the previous case and say why it's similar. And so it's kind of backward looking, which I kind of wanted something forward looking. And I also kind of saw a lot of imitation because I guess it's because it's stare decisis driven. It's a little bit status driven. It kind of felt a little dry as far as just there wasn't much innovation. There wasn't like new ideas. It's kind of just looking at the past and trying to analogize your cases to the past. And then people would say, okay, why don't you like business? Why don't you do business, but do the legal part? But I said the legal part was the least interesting part. I don't want to sort through 60 pages of contracting. I rather do the financial part, the economic part, whatever, the marketing part. So additionally, I loved economics and the markets, finance seemed interesting to me. So I told myself, why don't I pursue a master's in finance simultaneously? Now, I still pursued my legal degree because I thought it was interesting as far as it was a great skill set. So the ability to articulate yourself, the ability to public speak, the ability to think chronologically, the ability to write, the ability to understand legal issues that always come up in business, also being able to take business classes that are relevant to business, whether it's tax law, corporation, stuff like that. So it has a lot of value added. It's one of, I think, the most value added degrees if you're not practicing. However, people ask me, should I go if I'm not going to practice? I would tell them no, because it's not a straight path. Like you want to go on the straight path. Obviously, after the fact, it's great to have. It's good for marketing. It's good for the skill set, etc. But if you know 100%, I want to be a marketer or I want to be a public speaker, if you spend 3 years directly chasing that goal, I think you'd be better off. It's a straight linear path. But there's a lot of lawyers that don't practice and they develop a great skill set. So I also studied finance, master's of finance, love that, and loved my classes. And that's also where I got into investing and understanding the importance of that, because at the end of the day, obviously you can make money, but it's about compounding and growing that really helps you build wealth. And so understanding that, and also just understanding different markets. And I think with finance, the nice thing is you're always studying the future. You're always, let's say you're evaluating a company, it's the projection of future cash flows. So I think that sort of rigor always enticed me. And so after school, I decided I'm going to go to finance. I worked for several large corporations, Nestle, Norwegian Cruise Line, Pediatrics Medical Group, and I developed great skill set there. And just as far as analysis, learning from great people there, learning to work through deadlines, stuff like that. But I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing. and it always kind of itched at me. Regardless of what was happening, it kind of always, I guess it always comes down to deep down, you kind of know what you want. I know Steve Jobs talks about it in his famous commencement speech as far as like deep down, you know, and if you're not congruent with yourself, you're not going to be happy. It doesn't matter the external things that you have. If deep down you're not deeply connected to what you're doing, you're going to be unhappy. So I always kind of went back and forth with it, but also I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I think I'd say that a couple of years ago, it kind of became clear to me what I was really passionate about and what I liked, and that was investing, building wealth, understanding financial frameworks, trying to find the most efficient, most best outcome, understanding new markets, being able to understand risk. All those things were very appealing to me. So I always kind of had a feeling that I would go in that direction. And then obviously been managing my portfolio since I graduated, and just seeing the success there and also getting the capital from that allowed me to take the risk and jump into starting my own investment advising firm, Holistic Financial Planning. But obviously the process wasn't smooth. It was a very hard decision. And I think it comes down to, first off, I think it comes down to the opportunity cost, right? So okay, you're leaving a steady, stable job where you have an income, things are taken care of for you, and then you're going to the unknown where you have no idea. Also, I think with all these ventures, most people are going to say no, right? Because a lot of times it's they don't know your full skill set, and also it's their limitations coming upon you. So when I said the idea, almost everyone said, no, you can't do it. It's crazy. How are you going to be able to do this? I remember even going with a consultant in the industry, and he said, oh, you can't do it. But luckily, I was pretty determined. I made a lot of decisions by myself. So I felt confident in my ability to do that. And I remember he said 3 or 4 incorrect things on the call. But the only reason why I knew that was because I did my research as far as figuring out how to start that. So that gave me confidence in doing that. And then even I remember outlining everything in a one day and just saying like what the pros, whether or not I should do it, and the cons, whether or not I should not quit my job and do my thing. And I remember like everything was listed that I should do it. And there was like 1 or 2 things where I could state, oh, do not do it. And so that was the clarity that told me, okay, I should do it. And a couple of the things are, if you're on your deathbed, what do you wish you have done? Easy answer, right? You obviously always want to wish that you did something that you really strive for. That's something that you really wanted to do. If you fail, okay, you could go back to corporate, figure that out. Or also kind of just a moving goalpost, because I told myself if I was able to build up enough capital to support myself for a certain amount of time, I'll do it. And I built that capital. So, but then it's like, okay, but maybe you need more of a safety net. So that also was a tell for me that it's about dealing with the fear, conquering it, doing it. And I think once I left, it was such a peace inside of me because I was doing something that was completely congruent with me. And so I think a lot of times people are going to tell you things to do this, to do that, but I think it's highly dependent on what really talks to you. What really lights you up inside. And if you go down that path, even if you fail, you're at peace because you went for what you want. And so you're never going to have a what if scenario. I remember having a couple conversations with people, and I was telling them like they're all like in careers that ideally successful, they're making good money, but deep down they're dissatisfied because they're kind of curious, what would happen if I went on my own and did my own thing? On the other hand, there are people that are in corporations that love it. My boss's boss in my previous job loved his job. So I think as long as you're doing something that you're connected to, that you feel like I'm making a difference, is what's super important. And so I wanted to just go through some of the lessons I learned over my years, and they might be different than what you hear, but I think they're of pivotal importance. So I think the first one, which I kind of was hinting on, was understanding your internal voice and understanding what you're uniquely talented in, understanding the life that's good for you is of paramount importance. So I think a lot of times you're like, it could be anybody. It could be someone super successful or someone super charismatic or whatever it is. But you just blindly following them, you're not going to maximize your potential. Why? Because you're listening to them. They solved problems that are different than yours. It was a different set of circumstances. They have a different life journey. They have a different characteristics. So you just blindly following them is not a recipe for success as far as you being at your highest vibration, right? Yes, someone could be materially successful, but if they're miserable and they feel dissatisfied and they hate looking themselves in the mirror and they constantly need external validation because they don't believe it and they didn't explore a path that they know they should explore, it doesn't matter. So I think that's of paramount importance. Don't let your inner voice get drowned out. And I think sometimes when they're younger, people have that, they dream, but then as they get older, they play it safe. I think the quote is, most people die at age 25 and are only buried at 75. And I think the logic behind that is that people have ambitions, dreams, things that they want to explore. And then the reality is there's a lot of curveballs thrown at you. There are things that you can't control. It's harder than you think. You realize that maybe you want a different path. And then you become very safe. Pay the bills, don't do anything, go stay at home and not explore anything. And so when you're not in a creative, explorative state, the spirit inside of you dies, especially when you're not going deep within yourself and kind of becoming congruent with that. So I would say that's a big unlock and something that only you could know the answers to, right? Like you could get advice from people and listen to what they say and they could have good things, but the decision-making has to come from you. If you're not making the decisions, you're not at your highest vibration. Obviously, you could learn a premise here, a premise there from somebody else, but the ultimate decision-making, you have to be in the driver's seat. I would say lesson 2 would be, it's a good one. Lesson 2, I would say, okay, so just because somebody is older doesn't necessarily mean that they're not making the wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean they're making the right decisions or that they're on the path that you should follow. So obviously, respect your elders 100%. It's not supposed to be in a condescending way, but it's like the same way as you get older, you're still a flawed person. You still have decision-making that's flawed. You still have things that you need to explore. There's still things you need to learn. So a lot of times you get advice from older people, and it could be bad advice for you, whether that's because they're their own fears, whether they're trying to validate a life that they themselves don't believe in, and so they want you to follow it because they know it's not true, but as long as you believe it, then maybe they'll feel fine with that. So I would say be careful of who you take advice from. And I think especially if somebody is not, for instance, let's say it's a manager, right? Or someone like that. They could be giving you good advice, right? But what are their incentives? Their incentives are for the company. They could be giving you good advice, but they could also not be. So just understanding somebody's incentives and seeing, do they have what I want to have is always very important. I would say the third thing, life lessons, is there's no substitute to actually doing the thing, right? You could sit and study from day to tomorrow. For instance, let's say do social life, right? Like being good. If someone wants to be good socially, they can read 60 books. Are they going to be as good as somebody that goes every single day and networks and talks to people and travels and meets people? No, because the specific knowledge you learn from being in the game of something, there's no substitute to that. So, and whether that's through business, entrepreneurship, investing, whatever, marketing, whatever it is, public speaking, there's no substitute to actually doing the thing. So try to get to doing the thing. I think there was a study where application was so much more effective in learning versus just passively understanding something. So yeah, I know ironically I had 3 degrees, but I don't necessarily think that's the most efficient way. I think I learned things on the way, but I don't think necessarily that's the most efficient way. I think application, obviously you want to supplement with knowledge and stuff like that and learn, but I think application by far is the most important thing. I would say 4 is you can't be scared to fail. I think anytime you're scared to fail, you slow down your decision-making process. I think most things are reversible. I think the most detrimental thing is you getting hampered by a decision and it takes you a year to make a decision when you could have made it in a month. Even if it's a wrong decision, you can reverse course and change it within a month. So I think Jeff Bezos says fail fast, right? So most of the time, anyways, you'd probably make the same decision that you would have made. So let's say you make a decision within a year and then instead you decide to speed it up and make a decision within 2 weeks, right? The 2-week decision is probably the same as you would have made within a year. Even if it's the wrong decision, let's say 20% of the time you would have made a different decision that's more correct after a year. Let's say hypothetically. How detrimental is that decision to you if you make the wrong decision? A lot of times it's not that detrimental. You ordered the wrong coffee, you ordered the wrong food, you took the wrong flight. I mean, these things are not that big, where the biggest waste of time is your time. That's the biggest thing. So fail fast. Don't get pigeonholed by decision making. Obviously, if something has a lot of leverage, like if this is your career path or who you're going to date or something like that, then obviously take your time. But also you have to have a time limit and just, end of the day, you're going to have to jump into uncertainty. There's always uncertainty and you have to be comfortable with that. You have to let go and appreciate that uncertainty. And that goes into my next point, and that is the most valuable thing is not money, not materialistic things, not people's approval. It's your time. You can never get your time back, right? Let's say you have this car that you value so much, whatever it is, your favorite car. If someone goes and steals your car, technically speaking, someone will give you a new car. Let's say you really value this purse, right? And it's gone. You could always get a new purse. But if, let's say you're 22 years old, you can never get back that time once you're 23. It's gone. You will never be able to get it back. And for instance, and also maybe another way to frame it is, let's say you know someone's super successful. They're 60 years old. How much of their money, how much of their success would they give back to be young and healthy again? So never sacrifice, guard your time as the most important asset. And even within time itself, like if you want to get more specific, right? So if I told you you have a year healthy, vibrant, energetic, or 20 years in a hospital bed, you're probably going to pick the year, right? Because it's not all equivalent, your time. Your time where you're energetic, you're healthy, you're vibrant is a lot better than after a whole day and you're dead tired and you're falling asleep and you're doom scrolling or you're in a hospital bed. So at the end of the day, if we're getting more granular, more specific, it's your good time, your energetic time, your vibrant time. So that goes deeper as far as protect your energy. If somebody's constantly weighing you down, if it's not a path pursuing, understand that obviously you could have more energy than others, but it is finite to a certain extent. So guard that like crazy, right? That's something that is super important. And that goes into my mom told me this at the time, and it's so true. The quality of your life will be dictated by the people in your life, your relationships. So your relationships is of paramount importance. And you see, and like, look at your life. You'll probably see people that are successful, but they have a bad spouse, right? They don't have a good relationship with their spouse or their kids or whatever. And the quality of their life isn't as good because the people you're with, it seeps into you, right? You're constantly around that energy. So if you're constantly in a confrontation, you're constantly getting put down or you're putting down somebody or you're not connected to them and you're constantly with it, your quality of your life is not going to be strong. I think they say being alone is worse than smoking 20 cigarettes. I don't know the exact quote, but something like that. Loneliness is terrible. So your relationships is of paramount importance. So learning social skills, learning how to be likable, learning to read people and see, okay, this person is a good person to be around. They have good energy. They're uplifting. This person, not so much. So important. I think nowadays, especially with technology and people on their phones, the social skills are deteriorating. So, but that will never go away. It doesn't matter AI, doesn't matter all the technology that happens. The ability to connect to people are social animals. So your ability to connect with them is of paramount importance, and it will dictate the quality of your life. It's your highest, most leveraged point in your life. And that goes into my last two things. So what the second to last, and again, these are of no order. These are just things that you may not hear elsewhere and may be of value to you. So I would say your health, right? Going back to kind of what I was saying earlier, you could have all the success, even a great family, but if you're not healthy and you're in a hospital bed and you don't have the energy to enjoy, whether it's your great family, your great friends, your passion, if you're not able to do that, then what's it worth? So obviously, again, I think you could go too far, and everyone has their equilibrium as far as how much is worth putting in, right? I'm super into my health, my fitness, but I also love fitness. I love health. I can understand why somebody would say, okay, it's a little too much. I want to do less. Or someone wants to do more, right? Like, for instance, I don't know, this guy, Brian Johnson, he's taking a million supplements. His whole life has evolved around it. Again, don't quote me on this. I didn't look the exacts, but he's going to bed every day at a certain time. 9 p.m., whatever it is. I think personally, at a certain point, if it hinders the quality of your life, I don't necessarily know if it's worth it. But I think your health, almost no path is worth pursuing at the detriment of your health. I think that is super important. And when you're young, almost everybody, if you're blessed, you have good, you're able to do things. But your decision making, obviously genetics is important too. Your decision making around your health matters a lot more as you get older. So I would say health is of paramount importance. And then I would say the last thing is, I'm trying to think what would be the good last thing to, I would say let go, right? So if you look at the macro, right, just look at the macro. I don't know your particular life, but just look at the macro of the last 10 years. COVID, nobody anticipated that. The wars that broke out. And then you go to your personal life, whether it's good things that you didn't expect or deaths, sickness, illness, things that you would never anticipate. I know in my own life, I ended up in Cleveland for a year and a half. I thought I was going to practice law. I ended up doing finance. There's a million different things. I thought, I'm dating someone one day, we break up the other day, I injure my finger, I can't train for 6 months. So you never know what's going to happen. So I think obviously you do your best, you do your prep, you become prepared, but you have to let go in the sense where it's like there are things that are out of your control and you never know. You never know when your time is up. You never know when things could hit the fan. You never know when good things could happen. Obviously, there's probabilities, right? If you're doing the right things consistently, the luckier you get, right? On average. But you have to let go in the sense where it's, if you're like, okay, this is my life for the next 10 years, this has to be it. You're going to become bitter. You're going to be disappointed because the guarantee is there are going to be things you're not going to expect that are going to hit you. So the question is whether or not you can navigate that and be confident in your ability to say, hey, I can navigate any challenge. I have the tools to find the best path. Because also sometimes the best path is the path you can't foresee. I would have never guessed the path that I ended up right now, where I love what I do. I would never have created that path, right? I went to law school. I lived in Cleveland for a year and a half. These are things that I could never have foreseen. But I always am reevaluating and saying, obviously I have a plan, but you can't be too stuck to the plan because sometimes your best path is a different path. Sometimes the thing that you think you want, it doesn't entice you. It doesn't excite you. And you realize you learn more about yourself and there's a different path that excites you more. Napoleon, who was one of the best generals of all time, he was a master prepper. He would read the foot soldiers report, the general's report. He spent hours and hours, and he would play the most dangerous game in the sense of war, right? When you go to war, you are risking your life. Anything could happen. And he understood this. He said he understood that you prep a lot, but that you just have to have the confidence that you could adapt to any situation. Because once the war starts, there are a million things that you can't foresee. And sometimes the best outcome is not something that you practice, but you still have to be able to make the decision. But if you're like, this is my plan, I said this for 10 years, you're not going to be able to make that decision. And sometimes the chessboard is completely different. Things happen, deaths happen, or good things happen. So pursue, go after your goals, but also let go, because sometimes the best path is the path you can't foresee.